Greetings, class. Today I want to talk to you about Robert Hunt. Robert Hunt was the first Anglican minister in Jamestown. I first came across Robert Hunt. I was reading Mark Knowles' A History of Christianity in the United States and Canada, and he mentions Robert Hunt. And I thought about it. I said, well, I've studied Jamestown. I studied Colonial America. I've never heard of this guy, Robert Hunt. So I was interested to read more about him, and Noel never mentions him again. So I decided that I was going to research Robert Hunt. And through researching Robert Hunt, I realized something that I didn't know, that Jamestown was a religious colony. And of course, I've always been taught that Jamestown was an economic colony and the New England colonies were the religious colonies. And there's always that distinction between the New England colonies and the Southern colonies as far as religion goes. But as I researched Hunt, you can't doubt this is a religious colony. It's founded for a religious reason. Now, of course, there's economic reasons as well, and those are the ones we highlight. But there was very much a religious purpose in the founding of Jamestown, and Robert Hunt played a crucial role in that. Robert Hunt was a prominent English minister. He was the vicar of Reculver in Kent for a while, and then he eventually became the vicar of Heathfield in Sussex. And when they were discussing colonization, Richard Hakluyt personally recommended Robert Hunt to go to America and establish the Anglican Church in America. If you're not familiar with Richard Hakluyt, he was probably the biggest promoter of English colonization, and of course, he listed a lot of economic reasons why England should colonize, but he also mentioned religious reasons. Hunt was appointed by Richard Bancroft. Richard Bancroft was the Archbishop of Canterbury, which was the highest position in the Church of England other than the king. And of course, the king charged Robert Hunt personally. He told him to go spread the true word and the service of God, preach, plant churches, do all that in America. And so Robert Hunt did that. He was the Church of England's agent to establish the Church of England in America. Of course, he went over on the first voyage. And what's interesting there, John Smith, who we should all be familiar with, was actually arrested, and they were going to execute John Smith. John Smith was suspected of mutiny, and they were going to execute John Smith when they got to America. And it was Robert Hunt who sort of convinced them to not do that and sort of reconciled the whole situation. And so imagine if John Smith had died upon reaching America, how different would our history be? I mean, that's John Smith. He's a prominent part of our history and popular culture for that matter. And so he would have been executed if not for Robert Hunt, and John Smith's own words expressed that. Almost every reference to Robert Hunt I could find from another source, someone from the time period like John Smith, all have something positive to say about Robert Hunt. I never really see anything negative. I've seen some negative things about his life, like for example, there was some idea that maybe his wife had done something immoral, but that wasn't Robert Hunt's fault. There was no fault on Robert Hunt there. Um, but it's interesting. Everyone had something good to say about him. Um, he helped out and he helped establish the colony. Of course, he's establishing the church, but he did other things too. He helped build the first grist mill, and corn was a very important staple for those early settlers, and so them grinding corn to make bread and things like that was important. He helped build the grist mill. He helped build the first church, and their first church was actually just a sail suspended between some trees, but then they built a church. That church actually burned down, so they had to build a second church. But uh, in the fire actually burned a good piece of Jamestown, and they said that Hunt lost everything he had. John Smith said Hunt lost everything except the clothes on his back, but he never complained. Everyone always made the comment that Hunt never complained. He was always happy. He was always positive. He was always encouraging. John Smith said that when Robert Hunt died, it was a tremendous blow to the colony because they didn't realize how important he was to them, how much he tied them together, and how he always kept them going, kept them positive. He led them in daily prayer every morning and every evening. He had service on Sunday. He did die. He died sometimes between January and April of 1608. We're not exactly sure of the date. We know the fire was in the winter of 1608, and he survived that. But then by April, a ship left Virginia, went back to England, and it was that ship that delivered the news of his death to England. So we knew that he had to die sometime between January and April. He was buried under the church. He was buried in a very interesting manner. He was buried in such a way that he would, if on the resurrection, he would rise up to face his congregation, so to speak. Um, he was 39 years old when he died. There is a little bit of a theory among some medical doctors. When the ship left England, Robert Hunt was sick for about 6 weeks, and they had some poor weather, so it took them much longer than it should have to get to America. But Robert Hunt was sick for about 6 weeks to the point that they thought he was going to die. And some doctors have commented that they think, based on the symptoms that were recorded, that he could have had typhoid. And then, based on what happens to Jamestown later with so many people dying and the symptoms that are recorded about them, that Robert Hunt might have been the carrier that brought typhoid to Virginia and was responsible for basically killing a lot of the settlers. But then other doctors and historians have said, no, there's not enough evidence for that. We can't prove that. But it's interesting to think, what if that was the case? We don't know, but it's an interesting topping point. But either way, it's important to understand that uh, Jamestown was sort of, if Jamestown had not become successful, who knows if England would have even continued to try to colonize. And the fact that Jamestown was successful owes a lot to Robert Hunt because, as I said earlier, he kept them going. He was uh, their minister, and he served them, and he helped establish the church, and he encouraged them. He led them in prayer. He kept the faith, and uh, and that's important. I think he's an interesting character that doesn't get mentioned a lot in American history, and we do need to learn more about him. Thank you.